Come, come, ye saints, no toil nor labor fear, but with joy wend your way.
Let's talk church for a second.
Okay.
Very sensitive and difficult for some, maybe not. Are you familiar with kind of the statements made about homosexuality 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago? President Kimball, Boyd K. Packer,
Very.
Ernest Wilkinson, or, Mark E. Peterson, that kind of stuff. Many, it's traditional in LDS circles to look at our prophets and our apostles as prophets, seers, and revelators, as mouthpieces for God. And some of the things that have been said in the past are interpreted by many to be kind of awful about gays and lesbians and homosexuality. How do you guys reconcile that with your beliefs? Do you believe everything that they say? Do you feel like there's some other middle ground? How do you look on those past statements?
So I'll speak for myself. When I was 14 or so, I was reading The Miracle of Forgiveness, which in many ways is a good book, but I got to the section on homosexuality, and I literally threw the book across the room. I had a very visceral reaction to what was said, and it was my first read through, and I did not. It really upset me, and I remember after that being driven to a violin lesson. I played the violin by my dad, and then that's where we would talk about things a lot, is on our way to violin lessons. And and I was just like, Dad, have you read that? Like, what the heck is, this is a prophet of God, and he said these things, and I can't even remember what specifically was upsetting to me at the time, but his answer to that question was very helpful, and has been helpful for me since then. He was just like, he is a prophet, he was a prophet, because at the time he was no longer the prophet. And he is also a human being who lives in a culture. And there is some necessity of deciphering between those two things. And not everything that is uttered by a prophet is prophetic. And I remember at the time being like, but what? Because I was a very youthful mind and wanted to be more black and white in my thinking, and so that was hard for me to digest at the time. But subsequently, I have seen that reality borne out, and I tend to subscribe to the notion that I have recently been hearing. I can't even remember, but I think it was in a recent conference where they were talking about kind of the idea of consensus. This is why we have 15 witnesses and not one. This is why there are so many voices that have that prophetic mantle. And when you're hearing a consensus about an important topic that has more, I don't know even how to describe this, other than to say that yes, I have seen the language regarding this issue shift over time, and I'm so glad that it is shifting, and I think it needed to shift. But at the same time, I believe in prophecy, and I believe we have a prophet, and I believe that the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency are chosen by God to lead the church, and that they do receive revelations for the church body. So I think it's a complex delivery system of information. And it involves self, and it involves others, and it involves the Spirit, and having your own confirmations of truth. And anyway, yeah, I think that the recent website is, I was overjoyed when that was dropped. I was just like, Yes, you know, like
This is the mormonsandgays.org,
mormonsandgays.org. Mormonsandgays.org. Mormonsandgays.org.
Well,
Yes.
why? Well, some may not understand why that is exciting to you.
That is, even to this day, I have received direct discrimination because I self-identify as gay, as a member of the church, for me, in addition to, I'm just like same-sex attracted, homosexual, gay, okay, you know, like let's just talk in a language where we all understand each other, all right? Like let's just make sure that we're talking about the same issue here, you know? That's kind of my approach to this, but the fact that I even have used the word gay has been has been looked down on, and so it's very, it was a powerful moment to see that was the URL, and also to see that in other places same gender and same-sex attraction was used in the same website, and you know, like I understand the nuances and I accept them, and I accept what that means, and I'm not like thinking that we need to have a complete overhaul of our languaging of things, but just, yeah, it was significant to me. And the website itself was incredibly powerful and so encouraging, and I was just like, would that I had seen this 2 decades ago, you know? An amazing step, and a true exemplification of a church founded on revelation. And for anybody, both personally and I think as the church, revelation is not a vacuum process. There's a cybernetic element to the process of revelation. A problem arises and people need to seek answers, and those answers over time shift, and clarity comes over time through consensus and through the Spirit, and sometimes there are moments of clarity that are really profound, but other times there's more of a struggle. And so, anyway, those are my thoughts. What are yours?
That's great. I don't know. I couldn't add on to that.
Stamp of approval?
Yeah,
all
that's
right.
good. That's how I view it.
And just to quickly, some of the other things that people really love about the website is that they send the clear message that you're sending to parents,
Yes.
family, friends,
Yes.
which is
It's okay.
Love your
to
child,
love,
and it's okay to love your child. Don't reject your child,
even if they choose
no
a
matter what they
lifestyle
choose.
that's different from what the church would have them choose.
It is so much more important to keep that connection alive than anything else.
Yeah, keep your connection together intact.
It's funny to even say those words because they sound so like
Obvious.
like self-evident, but it is helpful to have that kind of endorsement of permission. Like, it is okay to love your child.
Yeah.
You know, it's good.
Critics or skeptics or people that have been harmed would see this notion of prophets very differently. They would sort of say, this is not an example of men listening to God and, you know, and sharing with the church God's will. Mm-hmm. This is an example of what some might describe even in very very severe language and say this has been a Holocaust where maybe thousands of young men and women have taken their lives over these awful statements that men who should have known better have said, and it's 180 years too late, and it's not so much a beautiful illustration of the prophetic process, but instead it's a reactionary process to Proposition 8 backlash, and it comes way late and after too many deaths, and it's just a PR stunt to try and save face for all the people that have been damaged. How do you relate to that, and how do you square that with what I believe was a sincere expression of your beliefs in the prophetic process?
I disagree with that wholeheartedly, and I feel like I have insight into that now more so than I ever have, where with this blog post specifically, I've never done anything public ever in my life. Like publicity has not been a component of my existence until 7 months ago. But I have discovered that it is really, really easy to ascribe motivations to actions in the aftermath, especially when it involves large swaths of people. And so, in terms of our situation, people have just ludicrous stuff like we outed ourselves as part of the Romney campaign. That is not our political persuasion necessarily. Like just these things that are.
We're trying to build a practice.
Yes, exactly. Like these just
or someone said because of the marriage equality vote in Washington State.
Yeah, like we were somehow premeditating that would.
Which you say you voted for.
Right, precisely. So it's like, it is really easy to draw certain conclusions in the aftermath. But the fact is, we were going on our gut and the spirit, and we were doing the best we could, and things then unfolded, and then you react to the things as they unfold. And I give the brethren that luxury, especially as I understand it more deeply. The luxury of being able to be human and do things that affect large numbers of people, and also the benefit of the doubt as they proceed forward and try and adjust as things are not as maybe as they should be. So that's my response, I guess.
And that feels very human and loving. What about those who would say, look, they've got to be ahead of us here. They've got the bat phone.
Yeah.
And they should be able to be ahead of the civil rights movement. They should be able to see, that's what prophecy is. It's seeing ahead of time and making the right choice before it's a major problem,
right,
versus after.
Right.
So how do you think about prophecy, or the prophetic element of prophecy, when for some it seems to come, oppose the civil rights movement until it's 10 years after, and then support civil rights, and oppose the ERA movement and then now oppose gay marriage, and it just, some would say that it's the reverse of prophetic. It's reactionary,
right,
too little, too late.
Right.
And I'm not trying to put you on the spot because I think you've answered the question. But
yeah, I don't mind. My response to that is, so ERA, for example, this is not going to be applicable to all subsets, but we'll take that one for example. And I think probably each of those issues has its own unique story. But I think that. Okay. I've never really expressed these thoughts, so forgive me if they come out weird. But part of being a prophet is preaching repentance to a people. That is when the whole, don't judge other things kind of dissipates, we aren't supposed to judge each other, but a prophet has to be able to assess a community and a situation. So I see, as a marriage and family therapist working in 2013, what I consider to be ramifications of, and I'm no historian and I don't get stuff and I have feminist ideas, but I see ramifications of the ERA movement and of masculinity and gender that are playing out, that are not in every case awesome, and in fact can be, I would consider to be problematic. And so an element of prophecy is being able to foresee those things and to warn against them. And sometimes those warnings are heeded, and sometimes in a culture that is a culture, they can't or won't be, And so I think that sometimes prophecy is making those kinds of predictions, and sometimes prophecy is knowing when to acquiesce. And so, I don't know. And so that's my gut opinion.
Didn't Moses come back with the 10 Commandments,
Right.
So he started with the higher law.
Right.
didn't work out so well, came back with the lower law.
Precisely.
That's what you're saying?
Something along those lines.
Not that
and
it's
it's
a lower
way
law,
more
but
nuanced.
you're saying it can change.
It's way more nuanced than that, and I
it's
don't mean to
complicated.
judge any of those things specifically, but yeah, right.
So it kind of sounds like you just have faith. You trust.
Precisely.
You trust that there are good reasons, even if you don't understand why.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's kind of what faith is. So our data show that those with same-sex attraction who are raised LDS, about 70% report leaving the church or losing their testimony in the church after acknowledging their same-sex attraction.
Yeah.
That's what the data seem to suggest. So my guess is, Josh, that you would not have married a woman if it weren't for the church. So when somebody does make that choice and it's based on religion, if it's true that 70+% of these people do in fact leave, is that a flimsy foundation upon which to build a marriage? Because if that faith erodes, if your faith, I meet a lot of people who were bishops or stake presidents.
Totally.
I've even met a former sort of area authority, general authority, who lost his faith.
Absolutely.
If that happened, would it? I mean, it's kind of speculative, but
Yeah.
is that a dangerous foundation to build a marriage on, knowing that faith could slip, especially for people in this situation?
Yes. No more dangerous than building a marriage on it for heterosexual people. I think that most LDS people are building their marriage on a lot of ideals having to do with the gospel and the church, and that if one does lose his or her faith, that suddenly everything is being reevaluated. Everything is being looked at in a completely new way, and it's difficult terrain, for sure. And so that being the case, absolutely, it would have major ramifications if I were to lose my faith, or if you were to lose your faith. It would. Would I recommend not to, you know what I mean? Like, building upon that foundation? No. We can't build our lives based on the possible contingencies of faith or loss of faith, or there's a risk in all the things we do, and I could get hit by a bus tomorrow or whatever, and that would pose a lot of challenges. You know what I mean? So I think that going forward sometimes requires, and I guess what you're saying is the risk analysis is that 70%. So no, I don't know. Yeah, it would affect things for sure.
Okay. Thoughts on Proposition 8? And we know your views on same-sex marriage. Were you sad at all that the church got involved? Do you even want to comment on whether that was appropriate, or whether in the future it would be appropriate, or do you just?
I think I'm going to steer clear on that one.
Okay, that's fine. Lolly?
Yeah. I'm still thinking about that one, so I don't even know if I could articulate what I'm thinking. I'm still making sense of it.
Yeah, I don't want to put you in the position of like having to oppose the church. So
Totally.
If the church, the church used to say the blacks couldn't hold the priesthood or engage in temple ordinances. Actually, at first they could, but then they couldn't, and then they changed it back to say that they could.
Right.
If the church were to change and say, you know what, same-sex marriage is okay, would you guys?
So I've had this question posed previously, and I think my favorite answer that I've given is that when I chose Lolly as my spouse, I did not choose her above all women. I chose her above all human beings, all people. So I don't think that would have any relevance to our relationship, any impact. Of course, you can't ever know what would happen, but that fear, she's it for me, like this is it. Like my life is great, and I mean that. It's a really, really good life, and I feel happy in my life, and I feel like I have I honestly feel like I have a soulmate in Lolly. And that would not change, so.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. Like, I love him. We've talked about this in a real way. Like, what if things did change? What will we do? And like the thought of losing him, like, I wouldn't be complete. Like, he's my love, like, who I want to be with forever. And I don't think that would change that.
No. Our life is going to continue together. And the visualizations that I have of us as like octogenarians with our grandkids running around and stuff are going to happen. Unless there's some bus accident, as previously mentioned, like knocking on wood right now.
That.
I know, I should, like any surface. But yeah, this is it for me, for sure.
So I love that, because I was actually thinking about a different question.
Oh, really?
No, but this is really important to me, because I was asking whether you'd be okay with the church's new policy.
Oh.
I love how he just jumped the
But
gun
you made
there.
it personal.
Yeah.
And it just shows the perspective. I'm thinking globally how personal
Yeah.
you took that question.
Yeah, we have thought about it.
We've been there.
And if the church were to say for other people that's okay,
My opinion is that I don't foresee that happening in terms of temple marriage. But we've talked about having faith, and I do. And if that were to happen, I would continue to have faith. So,
would you like to see a gay same-sex married couple be able to hold callings and serve in the church?
I think we're already starting to see inklings of that in certain communities.
We
and
are.
I find it very exciting.
There are I'm just going to say this. There are wards where people in same-sex relationships are not being punished by the church.
Yep.
They're
Yeah.
not having any church discipline. They're in full, committed relationships in the church, are able to pray, are able to talk, able to have callings with no punishment. It is happening.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to know if you believe that your same-sex attraction will disappear in the resurrection.
I do.
You do? Okay.
I don't know what that means in terms of personality traits, and I wrote a blog post about it, and my current belief is that it will, so yeah.
And the Boy Scouts. Opinion on the Boy Scouts.
I was a Boy Scout, and I do find it a little weird that I wouldn't have been considered a Boy Scout or been able to be a Boy Scout if I had been out, and I think that one of the things that I'm thinking about is that I would love to see inclusion, and I was very I made a joke when they were considering the change. I was like, I'm really excited by this, except for the fact that I was really looking forward to never ever being a Scoutmaster for the rest of my life. But my honest feelings are that I think that inclusion would be great, and I actually think that it would raise awareness. I think that because people are conflating homosexuality with pedophilia, I think is probably one of the concerns. And I'm like, no. Like, pedophiles are out there currently independent of homosexuality. And if there was a heightened awareness, then things like too deep leadership would be more consistently relied on, and in fact I think risk would be reduced overall. And so I actually think it would be beneficial to the organization and to the individuals. So that's my thoughts. Do you have what are your thoughts?
agree.
Okay.
I love the Boy Scouts.
Yeah. It's a good organization overall.
We should have asked this a little bit back, but what do you tell your kids? How do you handle this with your children? Do they know? Do you talk about it? Are they even old enough to be aware?
Yeah, our oldest is 6, and she doesn't even really understand sexuality yet. And so I think when we talk about sexuality, we will talk about homosexuality, and we will explain to her that Josh is homosexual, and obviously we're going to bring it into a gospel context and all of that. But I feel confident that it will be okay, and knowing our children, it's better that they know right away.
As early as possible.
Yeah.
13.
Oh,
earlier.
no, earlier than that.
Like maybe 8 or 9.
So you plan on having that conversation?
Yeah.
We're going to be watching their cues, of course, and probably each child might be different, and but yeah.
But then
I
society,
suspect-
anyways, parents should be talking about with their kids about sexuality at a younger age anyway. So
Yeah. I think it's
that's
going to end
important.
up being earlier than we would expect, but we would need to have a conversation.
All right. Well, now we turn to sort of a shift in the format. We've brought on two distinguished guests to be part of a panel. So Tim and David, welcome to Mormon Stories podcast. We're so glad you could join us for a bit of a discussion. Tim, why don't you go ahead and start and tell us a bit about yourself and why you're interested in this topic?
Sure, thanks for having me. I'm a native Utahn, born and raised devout Mormon. I'm a gay man. I consider myself, I am ex-Mormon now. I'm in a same-sex relationship that I've been in for almost 5 years. And I also have a very devout Mormon family and friends.
Excellent. Good. All right. David, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm originally from Chicago. I grew up there from a devout Mormon family. Came out to Utah about 10 years ago. Absolutely loved it. Stayed. I graduated from the Y, served a mission, came back and worked at BYU for the church, and just finishing up a master's degree in business.
Excellent.
And I run a blog called Gay Mormon Guy.
Right.
So.
Okay. So Tim, I want to start with you because I imagine that this interview might elicit some strong emotions for someone who not only self-identifies as gay, but who's comfortable with it, who's in a same-sex relationship. What did you feel and what did you experience as you heard Josh and Lolly tell their story?
Sure, I came into this, I think, with trepidation, and if I look at it, fear, really, because I had my prejudices about what's going on for the two of you, but as I heard your story, there's been more of a shift, I think. My worry that I think a lot of people that are maybe in a similar position as me may have is that you're the token couple, and people who are not as informed about sexuality, sexual orientation, and this topic would misrepresent you to negatively work against me and my rights. And so that's the concern that I had coming in. But as I heard you tell your story and I see, this authentic bonding and attachment that you have together, and I see that you really care for each other, one. And the second thing, to hear that you support my rights, it frees me to support you and to support what you're doing and say, hey, I think, that's really cool. So it really diffuses those fears that I had coming in, not knowing as much as I thought, or not knowing about you in great detail. So I really appreciate that. And I think, I don't know how representative you are of people in mixed orientation marriages. Typically I kind of think that that's correlated with people who are very fundamental and devout, and so they'll have a hard time seeing these matters as gray. But I certainly appreciate hearing your stances and your support.
Tim, were there any moments for you where you cringed or felt anxious or sad?
Well, yeah, when I hear the religious terminology, I'm not, because I've been so away from Mormonism. It's a foreign language almost to me now, and it's alienating in a way, and it also again kind of triggers those fears of that kind of language, and those ideas have been used to abuse people like you and I and David. So that creates those kind of uncomfortable emotions and kind of memories, and I have a hard time connecting with that. But outside of that, when just connecting like person to person, I think that helps bridge the gap, and when it's not all about seeing things through a Mormon perspective, but a global perspective. helps with that.
As you think about the love that you've experienced, and then you heard Josh talk about the fact that he's never actually been in a relationship with a man, or experienced the opportunity to have that sort of full expression of committed same-sex love that you've had. Was there a part of you that was sad for him, or said, "Man, you're missing out," or was there any of that you felt like you don't know what you're missing, kind of thing?
I wonder if you're curious. I wonder if both of you like grieve the loss, like Josh, for you, the loss of an opportunity to have sex with a guy, and for you to be with someone that is heterosexual, and had to go through that, similarly like how I had to grieve like not having this community that you guys have.
Exactly. Can we
Yeah, yeah.
I'm curious.
I perfectly phrased. Yeah, it was a loss that we grieved, that we
In
mutually
exchange, I
experienced.
guess
Yeah.
you give up one thing for another. And yeah, there is a loss.
Absolutely. And I think the comparison was perfect, and that's why these choices are really hard, because we're talking about real losses. You're talking about a real loss, and I'm talking about a real loss, and she's talking about a real loss, and the world does not accommodate us having all the things, and we have to make choices. And so, I think that was very well expressed. I liked how you said that.
David, let's bring you in. Any immediate reactions or thoughts or feelings about Josh and Wally's story?
Well, I've heard Josh and Wally's story before. We actually met Josh at a conference in November, right after I came out on my blog. And
Is that Circling the Wagons?
no,
Oh,
it was a conference in Provo, hosted by
at UVU.
no, at the Provo Convention Center.
Okay.
AMCAP.
It was through the MCAP. And I was there standing with Josh and Ty Mansfield, and one of the comments that was said was like, "Hey, these are like the three Mormons who have like blogged and done things and got some type of notoriety, all standing here together. We could be like a little club." And
The Believing Gay Mormon Rock Stars.
That's right.
so
Start a band.
yeah, so I love their story, and as far as like, it was interesting to hear, because I honestly believe that at some point in my life I'll be in a marriage with a woman and incredibly in love and happy, and like I agree wholeheartedly with many of the things they said, in that you have to be really careful. You have to understand what it is that you're going into. You have to realize that it's probably going to take more work than your best friend who got married at 21 off his mission to his girlfriend that he's known for 15 years. But at the same time, having the faith that like something can happen that you don't understand, that you can still be completely homosexual and completely in love with someone, that your brain has the ability to do that, and that God has the ability to do that, that the stars will align, whether it's luck or blessings. That whole conversation about blessings made me like want to grab the mic, because for me, I don't look at life as blessings being proof of God's love for one person more than another. I think that in our culture and in our world, because blessings can come from righteousness, sometimes we ascribe blessings to righteousness. And I think that God only gives blessings.
I'm on the end of my lens.
So, I mean, you look in the scriptures, and sorry to use Mormon terminology, but you look in the scriptures and it says that a pure fountain can't bring forth muddy water. And in my perspective, like everything that happens in your life is a good thing. And part of life is figuring out what those good things are and why they're part of your life.
Even if their experience is bad or
Exactly.
sad or hard.
And I mean, yes. I mean, my little brother just got through his last round of chemotherapy from leukemia. Second sibling that I've had who had cancer. And an incredibly difficult experience for him, for our family. But a huge blessing in our family as well. And I think that honestly, all things are blessings. And for me, like, that's what I wanted to jump out and say. Because I look at the really, really, really hard things that have happened in my life. And looking back on them, you have 20/20 vision. But I'm really glad that they all happened.
Tim, I don't want to put you on the spot, but anything about hearing David share his feelings that causes you feelings or concerns?
Well, I get concerned about the religion, the religion being a reason for not being in a same-sex relationship. Like, I wonder if we took that out of the equation, what rational reasons do people provide for, being in a mixed orientation relationship, being closeted, or not being closeted and being in a same-sex marriage. And my concern is how much of that is our choices when we're I guess religiously devout. How much of them are really being externally driven through like shame and ideals that may not be our own. So I have a hard time not seeing that, and I wonder that when I meet gay Mormons, that, because I once was one. So I know for me that was the story, that so much of it was fear and shame, and once that was gone, and once I could see, oh my gosh, look, I can be in a community that loves and supports me, and not despite the fact that I'm gay, but just because I'm me, it brings a lot of this stuff into question for myself, and it does become hard to hear those kinds of things.
So I appreciate your responses. For me, there's kind of a bit of an elephant in the room, in that Josh and Lolly, we just got through talking about, if mixed orientation marriages were to have a big red warning label, that you would sort of endorse the label saying, warning, potentially hazardous to your health, be warned. And yet we have David, who just said, in some ways, he's kind of inspired by your story and really optimistic that he's going to be able to do this. And I know that parents of young gay and lesbian Mormons are feeling the same way, that everyone's thinking, okay, it may be 5%, but I can do it. I've got that faith, I've got that determination, I've got that trust in the Lord. And even if it's 5 or 10%, that's a huge number of marriages and people who are going to say, I can have intimacy, I can have faith, I can be righteous. And so in a way, it seems like we're doing the thing that we just got through saying we're really scared might happen. And I'm wondering how you guys feel about that, hearing David say he's really excited. David, I'm wondering how you feel hearing me express that concern.
So I think maybe we envision different labels, slightly different. I think that the warning, I think there should absolutely be a warning. I think the warning that I think would be most fitting would be something along the lines of proceed with caution, with great caution. And also, it's going to be a large label apparently, but get educated and really know what you're doing. But I would not try to dissuade people that wanted to enter into a mixed orientation marriage from doing that. I think it actually comes down to what you were saying, that Tim, what you were saying, Tim, what you were talking about in terms of shaming, being shamed, and as opposed to authentically entering into the life that you want for yourself, for your own internal reasons as opposed to external reasons. I think I think it ultimately comes down to that. And I think that in terms of my specific story, for me, it all centers around the fact that my dad said that he would love me no matter what. That was a pivotal moment for me when he said that he would love and accept me no matter what I chose for myself. That freed me to explore options in a way that I wouldn't otherwise have been able to. I was not acting to please other people. I was making choices based on my own internal compass. And I think that when that is happening, in a case maybe like David's, or, I think that that's a critical component of any decision-making process. And but the label still needs to be there. Like, proceed with great caution.
And education.
Education. And know what you want for yourself. This is what I talk about with my clients a lot. Like, okay, cool, like you have a culture and a family and all these expectations from different people, but like, talking to you, like inside of you, what do you want for yourself, for your life? And answers vary.
Yeah. David, are you at all worried that you'll end up like this number, the 75% we're throwing around? Like, sometimes there's this notion of naive optimism that I can do it and I believe in me. Are you at all worried about the risks?
Well, the thing is that I'm not totally sure it's going to happen. And I don't think that I would go into it unless I felt like, given all the risks, it was definitely worth it. And when I say that I'm excited about life. Like, whether it's finding a soulmate or finding someone that I will work with or not. I think that life is awesome regardless. And so, I'm definitely aware of the risks. Having my own blog, I've heard many stories, happy stories, sad stories, people who are currently in mixed orientation marriages who are incredibly happy with their lives and who have multiple kids and have never told anyone but me. Or people who tell me that I'm a sinner for just even thinking about doing that. But I honestly believe that focusing on God and doing the right things, that I'll go down the best path. And whether that's finding someone now, finding someone in 40 years, not finding someone in this life, I'm good with that.
Tim, I'm wondering if there's any part of you as a gay man that worries that Tim and Josh are setting an example, let's just say for the gay community, where they're basically, instead of saying not only I live who I am, but I'm going to live as I'm oriented because there's nothing wrong with being same-sex married or in a same-sex relationship, that in some way they're sending messages to people to not be who they truly feel like they should be, at least in terms of relationships.
Yeah, and I think for all of us that's true, because homophobia is a cultural value, and so all of us, it's like the smog in the air, we're all breathing it in, and we all have it to a degree, so it's just being aware of that. From what you say, it seems like you're more accepting and comfortable because you're open about your orientation, and maybe that's enough for both of you. I don't know. Everyone has to choose. I think from my own experience, it wasn't worth it to me to stay in a community that was not accepting of me. Like, why would I keep pushing to belong somewhere where they don't want me, where they don't fully love me, to simply answer your question, yes, to a degree, I do worry about that, and not that it's something unique to you. I think it's something that all three of us share because you're married to someone, that we're all marginalized within the community at large, and especially in the Mormon community.
All right. Tim, any final questions for Josh and Lolly before we wrap up? Or comments? Sorry, I was going to ask you one other question. Can you tell us what it's like to be in a same-sex relationship? Is it, if you were to sort of, they've had a chance to say how wonderful their relationship is. Can you talk about how yours is?
Yeah. In a lot of ways, it's the same. Ups and downs, companionship, honeymoon period, honeymoon's over, friend stage, all these kinds of things. The other relationships that are non-homosexual go through. One thing that, well, I think you guys get this now that you're out, you would get this to a degree, but like, I have extra stress in my relationship that I have to worry, we just went on vacation. We have to worry if where we go, are they going to be favorable to us? Are we going to be discriminated against? Are we going to be threatened in any kind of way? And so it has that additional stress, which makes it hard, I think, for same-sex marriage. That's why I think same-sex marriage is so important. You give those statistics, well, what's the common thread in that? It's mutual love and support, that we all need community and support, and that we're taking that away in these religious communities, and then we're seeing people flounder, and then we're wondering why. Like, it's tragic. It's very unfortunate. Hearing Josh and Lolly's story, I greatly appreciate it and can say that my perspective is broadened. And because I hear, and I'm going to reiterate, because I hear that you support me and my choices and not just like, oh yeah, hey, I support you, gay is cool, but actually politically you are, and very publicly, again, that frees me to mutually support you. And so the people in the gay community are threatened by your relationship because there's so much historical trauma regarding the treatment of gay, lesbian, bisexual people, that hair, look, be like them. They're trying to be heterosexual, just, be like us who are heterosexual. And it's very invalidating. And then the flip side is that I could see that it's invalidating to you, I wonder, because you're like marginalizing both communities.
Yes,
I see.
exactly.
You don't have a place in either.
So true.
So true.
Except aren't you guys kind of poster children, like the New Hope?
Oh, no.
There are
get
communities.
flack
There in every sector. There are those that are supportive and those that think that we are the devil reincarnate
In the church?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. There are people that do not believe homosexuality is real still.
Oh.
That think that I am totally deceived and,
Well, and I think maybe then you're a bridge for those kind of people
Right.
that just are not going to reach the level of progress
Right.
that we want to see in life.
And that's
Yeah.
one of the things that we've seen is that in addition to the response that we've talked about, which is unfortunate, where the story is proliferated in a way that is kind of abusive. On the other hand, we've gotten a lot of response of people that are like, I actually did not believe that homosexuality was real until I heard your story, and you don't have a reason to be lying about it because you're living in the way that my thinking thinks people should live, and yet you're still saying that you're homosexual, and so it's the step towards actually believing that it's a real thing and not changeable. And I wanted to point out that you made the comparison of our relationships in terms of marginalization, and we have the luxury of privilege because people that see us assume, if we're on vacation, people will see us and assume that I am heterosexual, and so we have that inherent privilege, whereas you guys don't. Yeah. And so I think
we
it's
appear
probably
to be
a thing,
normal.
right? "Quote unquote normal," and so I think that you probably face that much more in a much more challenging way than we do, for sure.
You guys can pass.
That's right. That's right.
The term.
That's exactly right. Totally.
Well, because in our community, in the gay community, you have to continually worry about, am I going to be accepted here? Am I going to face hostility? And can I go home for Christmas? Some partners, the family is not accepting at all, or one they're really accepting, and you don't have that same support. You don't have that same legal protection. You know, I don't have the same inheritance rights or automatic inheritance rights or always the same access to health insurance and those kinds of things, which really stinks.
Totally. I can imagine.
So I could see why. I mean, I see what's appealing in being a heterosexual relationship beyond being with someone that you
Yeah.
really love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it really does cost a lot to come out fully and to be in a same-sex relationship, and it costs not to as well. So I think
Right.
it's like what you said earlier. You
Exactly.
get something, you lose something.
It's a choice, and it's knowing what choice you as a human being want to make and what's best for you, for your own life and for yourself. And it's okay that sometimes choices look different for different people.
I wonder for you guys, how do you reconcile, and I wonder this for the people, so this is for all three of you, the loved ones that I have in the Mormon community, that on the one hand they're supportive of me, and then on the other hand, just by participating in an organization that is oppressive to me, they're complicit in it. Like they're giving tithing, they're whatever, they're going along and endorsing it. And I'm just wondering, how do you make sense of that and reconcile that in your mind to not feel like upset or guilt or do you know what I mean?
I'll answer. So, I definitely believe in everything the church teaches. And so, like, my views differ from Josh's and Lolly's in some places. And so I've never felt like the church was oppressive in my life. Or that, I mean, I never really felt oppressed by anyone, whether at school or, I was never bullied at school. And when I came out to my family and friends, like, no one thought that it would have happened, type of thing. And I think that the culture of the church is something that definitely needs to change, and that is changing. But I also believe that the doctrine of the church and all the rest of the programs that are supported by tithing or by service or whatever else are definitely worth supporting. And I think that having the conversation that changes the culture is an important way of changing that culture and making sure that people don't feel oppressed, making sure that people feel like they can be authentic and understanding who they are and who they want to be.
So if I can follow up with that, I heard you say you're not oppressed by the church, but do you see that others who may identify with your same identity as gay, as a gay Mormon, that they're oppressed? Like people like Josh
Or you, Tim.
or myself?
Well, I can only talk about my own experience. I've never felt oppressed personally, and I'm sure that it's definitely possible for people to feel that, but at least from what I've seen in my life, the times when I felt like I didn't fit in the church, it wasn't because I had understood the doctrines correctly. It was because I had interpreted a cultural bias as a doctrine, or I didn't accept myself at that point. And so I'm not totally sure. I know that it can be for some people, but I think that addressing the culture will probably solve most of those problems. At least the ones that I've seen in my own life.
Do you have a response, Tim?
Yeah, I disagree. I think that it's doctrinally based. You have prophets that are on record in the Mormon church saying homophobic statements, and I agree with some of what you're saying, but I know that going along with Mormonism, it's very authoritarian, and you have you know, it's what the authority says. And so we're not used to this culture really challenging that, because we're not taught skills to do that, and we're not taught that it's okay. I'm a social worker, and I see such parallels between, I've worked with women who are abused, and I see such parallels between Mormons who struggle with Mormonism and women who are abused, that they just cannot leave it. They have a hard time seeing the oppression. All their resources are wrapped up in this guy, or in this case, the church. So it makes it hard to leave. So it is hard for me to fully see to agree with that.
And we're wrapping up, so go ahead and just respond to
Just
Tim and David and
A final thought on
bring
that.
it back home.
Yeah, I'll try. So in my perception, I'm looking at Mormonism as kind of a like looking at different systems, you know. So like our culture, our broad culture, like American culture, also has some problematic features with regards to homosexuality and oppressiveness, and there have been some things said, you know, within our culture, some ideas propagated that are like really messed up. And I don't necessarily think that the solution to that is to jettison the culture itself, but to within the culture attempt to galvanize a shift of paradigm that would be better and be kinder and be more appropriate to others. And so I view that on levels, so our broad culture, and then also LDS culture, and even just like my family culture that has that same kind of dynamic sometimes. And so that's how I view it, for better or for worse. That's how my brain conceptualizes it. So.
All right. Well, I just want to thank this panel for a fascinating and a wonderful discussion. Tim Wayman, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your experience. David Peterson, thank you so much also for coming on. And as we kind of wrap up, Josh and Lolly, I just want to thank you guys for your beautiful story, for the people that you are, for your courage, and for your sensitivity and insightfulness. It's been such a pleasure to have you on Mormon Stories Podcast, Gay Mormon Stories Podcast. Just want to thank you so much for coming on, and wish you guys all the best.
Oh,
Thank you.
thanks.
Such a pleasure.
Yes,
It was
definitely.
Awesome. We loved it.
Good.
Thank you.
I'll just end by saying, listeners, please check us, or viewers, please check us out at mormonstories.org or gaymormonstories.org. Feel free to comment there. Maybe we can even get our panelists and Josh and Lolly to respond to some questions if possible. Want to thank everyone for their support. Please share this with family and friends. Get the word out. I think that a lot of this wisdom shared today can bless a lot of lives. And we promise to have other types of relationships on the podcast, including healthy, robust same-sex relationships, to make sure that we give lots of perspectives. But we're very glad to have yours today. Wish you all the best, and thanks for joining us. Take care.
Come, ye saints, no toil nor labor fear, but with joy wend your way. Though hard to you this journey may appear, grace shall be as your day. 'Tis better far for us to strive our useless cares from us to drive to the sand joy. Your hearts will swell